Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to talk mental health with amazing humans. For this session, I have the pleasure of introducing Chris Lytas to this conversation. Welcome, Chris.
G'day, how you doing, Matt?
I'm doing all right, thank you very much. Episode 23 of 24, so the penultimate episode. So there's no, high expectations on this one. Of course, it's going to be amazing.
Right.
Yeah, so prepare yourself.
Yep.
As I always do with these, just a brief introduction how I know Chris and just to give the audience an idea of how we connected. We're connected through social media, through LinkedIn, and as I am with many people actually. But the fascinating thing is the work and the conversation around mental health is so important to you. I'll let you do all the sort of definition of what that means and describe it for people. But as soon as somebody comes across my path who is into this subject, who is doing stuff to help support the conversation of mental health, I'm all over it. So it's great to have you. I'm so happy that you agreed to come on this episode, which is, I know it's 9 o'clock in the evening for you. I feel like I'm in the middle of the day here. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, but I've been awake for a little while. And I'm just going to throw it over to you now, Chris. Introduce yourself. Let the audience and listeners know who you are, please.
Right. So Chris Lytas. I am in Geelong, which is about 100 kilometres out of Melbourne in Australia. My day job, I work in aviation for one of the major airlines here in Australia. But my pseudo role is I'm the co-founder and director of a mental health organisation here called Right Mate. So we are a small volunteer-run mental health brand focusing on men's health, and in particular, our community here in Geelong. We're very localised. So good mate of mine and I started it up probably nearly 2 years ago now. And we were introduced not long before that by a mutual friend who sort of went, hey, you guys need to get your head together because you're both looking at doing some pretty cool stuff, and I reckon as a force you'll do some interesting things. So Right Mate is predominantly, it started as just a website where we wanted to provide local resources to both clinical and non-clinical support services for men in the region, because there wasn't anything like that that we could see. And being in a regional centre, local access to resources is really critical. People like that personalised approach. Yeah. We sort of went down that path, and then from there we had a few opportunities to speak at a couple of the schools here, which very hastily forced us to put together a youth workshop. Because we sort of went, yes, we can do that, no worries at all. Walked away and went, holy crap, what are we doing? And that then sort of steamrolled from there. We have since then, we've now got 5 different workshops that we deliver. We've recently just gone into a 3-year partnership with the cricket club here in Geelong as their wellbeing partner for the next 3 years. We also on the side run something called the Man Walk. So the Man Walk here in Australia, it's a national program for use of a better term. Yep. It started on the Central Coast of New South Wales as a guy, the founder, Mark Burns, just going for a daily walk. Some mates got involved. One mate moved up north. He started one and they just went, hey, we're onto something here. And there's now, I think at last count, around 74 walks around the country. Wow. Very simple concept. Ethos behind it is walk, talk, support. It's an hour. We operate twice a week on a Wednesday night and a Saturday morning. It's free. There's no check-in, and it promotes that social connection amongst men, which is lacking in this day and age. Yeah. So we run that on the side as well. That's kind of our regular, and we've built a really good sort of base with that, and we're continuously getting you guys sort of coming in and out as they feel that they need the group. Yeah. But they always know that the group's there regardless. So rain, hail or shine, we're there if twice a week. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell in terms of what I do.
Brilliant. Wow. And you're doing some great stuff. You've got a day job, and you've got this other part, which is a huge piece as well with the mental health elements.
Yeah.
Which leads us into the big part, which is the story. This is The reason why I'm doing these, of course, is to encourage more people to talk about mental health and talk about mental health in a tell your story version of mental health as a journey, right? And this is such an important part. It's been fascinating to hear so many people over the last 24 hours doing this exact thing. So I'm going to let you go really with tell us your journey with mental health, if that's all right, Chris.
Yeah, sure. So what I'd like to do before I sort of get into that is just, I'm going to throw some numbers at you.
Okay.
And these are some pretty raw numbers. So the 2019 stats on suicide were released a couple of months ago here in Australia. So in 2019, we saw 3,318 suicides in the country. Of those, just over 2,500 were male. 971 of those 2,500 were males aged between 35 and 54.
Right.
And then 815 were between 15 and 34. In Australia, since 2009, there's been a 40% increase in male suicide. And since 2018, just short of 7.5% increase. And 2019 here in Australia saw more males die by suicide than ever before in our nation's history. On average here in Australia, 7 out of every 9 suicides a day are males. So there's some pretty startling figures, and the reason why the need for this kind of work is there. My story goes back to, I think the trigger point for me was 2016. I'm mid 40s and had battled with various levels of anxiety and depression from a very young age. It grew up sort of in the 80s here in Australia, which was the mindset of, you're a boy, you don't show your emotions, you don't talk, you don't cry, you just suck it up and you deal with it. That led to some issues through primary school, high school, young adult life, etc. In 2016, spoke to a really good mate of mine who was chatting away with. We hadn't spoken for a while, but one of those mates where you can pick up 4 weeks later and it's like you've never sort of left each other's side. Had plans to sort of connect that weekend. 2 days later, I got a phone call and he was dead. So he suicided.
Wow.
Pretty big slap in the face. Same age, married, couple of kids. For all intents and purposes, had the world at his feet and suicided. I was in the midst of transitioning jobs at that point. So I did what I knew. The only thing that I knew that I could do was throw myself into that job. Buried it, did the funeral, thought I'd grieved, etc., etc. Threw myself into this new job. Everything was fine, whilst very quickly going down a very dark rabbit hole, to the point where I got all of our personal affairs in order. I had a date. I knew when, I knew where, I knew how.
Right.
But then, thankfully, I've got a very astute wife who 2 days beforehand on the couch asked me in no uncertain terms what was going on one night, and that pretty much broke my dam. I let it all out.
Okay.
The next day, GP got put onto a mental health plan, got into the CSI, who I still see on a semi-regular basis as I need him. I see him. Once I got through, I think, that initial period of counselling and assistance with him, my focus then turned to, okay, how do I stop this from happening? So in 2017, I was offered the opportunity through work to run the New York Marathon for Beyond Blue, who are a sort of major sort of mental health organisation here in Australia, not for profit.
Yep.
So I jumped at that like there was no tomorrow. It raised just short of $20,000 in the space of about 8-9 months, all by doing community-based events. So the more I got out into the community and spoke about what I had experienced, the more people shared what they were going through and what they had experienced. So that for me was the light bulb moment to go, okay, when I get back from this, how do I change our community? How do I change the conversation? My running top that I wore in New York, on the back had a list of 32 names on it, of people that had either lost their battle, were going through some mental health issues, or were people that it had got close to suiciding and were trying to keep themselves going. The youngest on that list was at the time an 8-year-old boy, of a very close friend of mine, who is the most beautiful soul. He's the most beautiful child. And so running through New York, and sort of, you hit that proverbial wall that you do when you're doing a marathon, and it was the stories on the back of my shirt that sort of kept me sort of pushing on, and finishing. And I did, and it was amazing.
Brilliant. Well done.
And then I've gone and done a few others since then, because they're addictive. Once you do one,
I've done one. I've not done another one since.
Yeah, so I ticked over my 5th last year. I think so. Don't know if I got another one in me, but hey, we'll see how we go.
Have a look. Yeah.
So came back. It took a while to sort of figure out what it was, and that's where sort of I met Luke, who's my business partner with Mate, and the rest is sort of history from there. Our ethos is very much, I run by an ethos of it. We want to make people comfortable with talking about the uncomfortable.
Yep.
Right. But then we want to take it further than that, because the old adage of, oh, all you need to do is talk about it and you'll be right, is, with due respect, bullshit. If you don't take the time to understand the why, you're not going to understand the how to fix it. So we place a huge emphasis on understanding the why behind it, and then providing people with, I suppose, just very basic life skills, and the confidence to be able to recognize nonverbal cues, to be able to use the right type of language that doesn't come across as threatening to someone, whilst also keeping themselves safe. And a whole lot of other sort of range of things. We break down masculinity and all that kind of stuff as well with the younger kids, and sort of teach them that it's okay, and show them sort of how to talk with gravity, and how, from a support person's perspective, to give someone the space and that feeling of safety to allow them to do that without sort of fear of judgment, or your own automatic need to go, well, I've got to fix this. So, we teach them restraint, and all the info we deliver is, certainly it's info that I take off Beyond Blue and Headspace and the Co, and we just deliver it in a way that people understand, and we encourage the conversations within our workshops as well. So it's very interactive. So that's kind of the why, and sort of got me to sort of where we are at the moment. And it's a continual, process, really. But it's a passion, because you know that the more, and as scary as it is, the more you put yourself out there and deliver this kind of stuff and talk about this kind of stuff, it doesn't necessarily become easier, but you know that it's having an impact. You'll never know how much of an impact it's having, and you don't do it for that, but you know that it is, and that's what keeps you going.
Absolutely, and that's what's kept me going for the last 20 odd hours, and somebody in this in the community listening to this will find something in one of these episodes that they'll go, yes, I needed that. And I've had that already, by the way, in terms of the recordings over the last few hours. Because I've had people already come to me and go, that was so inspiring, or that was something I needed to hear. And you know what, that's what it's about, isn't it? It's lovely when you hear that, though, and get that feedback, because what you're doing does mean something to, I don't have an issue if one person listens to the podcast and they get something out of it. I'm happy. Do you know what I mean? I don't need a million people to listen and go, what a pile of rubbish that was. I want, all I need is one person to say, that really helped, or that was really useful, or and I guess that's sort of similar to what you're trying to achieve is, you don't want these suicide rates to keep increasing.
No.
And how do we stop that? How do we have exactly the same issue here in the UK. It's it's on the same sort of trajectory. Unfortunately, there's not sort of a decline in suicide rates, which is a big challenge. And we have to talk, we have to open conversations first before we can support. Because if you're not telling me you're worried, or you're not telling me there's a problem, I can't really do much to help you, and ownership. And I want to sort of just touch a little bit on your experience, if that's okay, if you're okay with me asking about that. And I know you've shared, thank you so much for sharing what you did. When you were at your lowest point and you were making those plans and you had a thought, in place, you'd set in motion some events that, meant that you were seriously contemplating this thought. Were you feeling that was the only option? Is that what you were feeling at the time?
I don't know if I was feeling that was the only option. My mind had convinced itself, and subsequently got into my conscience, that it was the only way that the pressure and the heaviness that I was feeling was going to stop.
Right. Yep. And I hear that.
I couldn't see another way to release it.
Yeah.
Because I didn't think that anyone would understand or take it seriously enough. And that's a byproduct of past experience where I had opened up and shared and was effectively dismissed. So once that happens to you, you automatically go, well, no, there's no point.
That is, and that is the biggest frustration of all of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Support at the point where somebody needs it, rather than at crisis when somebody is, pleading and demanding it from a dangerous perspective.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because if you walk into, I use an analogy like where, if I walk into a room full of people and I've got a cast on my arm, or I'm on crutches, 20 people in that room will ask me, what did you do? What can we do to help? Do you need anything? Right. If I walk into that same room and announce that I've got clinical depression, their body language will change. They will divert their eyes, and they will, without any malice or intent, but because of what's been drilled into them from society, they will come out with terms like, I'm sure it's not that bad, you'll be right. Maybe you just need to sleep on it. Because we've been taught, if you can't see it, we don't talk about it.
See, I have a thought that says, maybe as a social experiment, we should walk into a room with a bandage around our heads, because it's a visual prompt that says, I have a bad head. And then somebody might ask, and if you say, I've got depression, see what the reaction looks like. Oh, I didn't realize you could see it with a bandage. Have you cut your head? And I think that's the challenge. But you're absolutely right. I've used that analogy many times myself. And, we bend over backwards to somebody on crutches or in a plaster cast, and they could have just fallen over drunk, right? And often that's what people do, sports injury or a drunken fall down some steps or slipping in the garden. Whereas depression and anxiety are not, they're hard. They're proper illnesses that, you need to take seriously. And that's the challenge, isn't it? And it's, we've got to become proactive in our approach to this. And I think what you're doing is a right, the right mate piece is a step in that direction, isn't it? Is proactively approaching conversations before they get to crisis. Because how do you avert suicide? Well, you stop it ever getting into the thought pattern if you can. And that's the way to do it.
Very much so. What we want to do is, we acknowledge that people have mental health problems. And, if I put a sports analogy in, I followed Liverpool in the EPL since I was knee high to a grasshopper, right? They've had a pretty bad few weeks. And, it hasn't exactly been roses. And I have those feelings of, oh man, I feel down. And that's a valid emotion that you're feeling.
Sure.
Right? And, God forbid they ever got relegated, I'd be beside myself, right?
But I only laugh because I'm an Everton supporter, so I don't. I'm very happy when they lose.
Yeah, no worries anyway. So
Yeah. We shouldn't be having this.
oh,
Lucky there's a big divide between us right now.
exactly, mate.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Um,
it's all good.
but you can, if your team loses, the premiership,
Yeah,
you can have genuine feelings of depression and
yeah,
sadness, and
yeah.
that's a mental health problem, and that's absolutely valid. What we want to do is stop it at that point
Mhm.
before it becomes a mental health condition,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because once it becomes a condition, then it's ridiculously serious,
Mm.
and you need to get that clinical help, and you need
Yeah.
professional assistance. So if we can get people to acknowledge that, yep, you know what, you will have mental health problems throughout your life, and they will go up and down, and that's perfectly valid. It's giving you the tools to be able to stop it at that level.
Yep.
And not allow it to get to a point where it is effectively a mental health condition.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I 100% support that. And I think that's what we've got to try and do, isn't it? So question for you. How are you at the moment? How are you feeling at the moment?
Um, Overall good. It's been a really interesting period. Similar to you guys, we went through a pretty severe lockdown here in Victoria last year, and obviously when COVID first hit, the whole nation went into effectively a lockdown. Um, I was stood down working in aviation. It's not ideal for a pandemic.
Yep.
So it's I think last year I worked maybe 4 months. And only went back probably a few weeks ago. So there's been challenges with that throughout.
Yeah.
But overall, I'm actually in a really good space. I've got a pretty robust toolkit
Yep.
now that I'm very good at recognizing when I am slipping.
Yep.
And I'm very good at removing myself from situations that are going to be detrimental. Or if I feel that something is too much for me, I will take a step back. And I'm fortunate. My business partner Luke is, he's a godsend. So a few weeks back I said, mate, look, I'm not right at the moment. I just need to take a step back a bit. And he's like, yep, no worries. What do you need me to do? And that just allowed me that time to sort of process what was going on inside my head and myself, reset myself, and go, okay, we're good now. So I don't get it right all the time, by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm certainly a lot better at it.
Yeah, none of us do, and
Nah.
we're good at preaching at times, and I find that often.
Oh yeah.
Tell people what to do, and they'll do it, but they don't. We don't like to be
No.
told what to do, and it's about acceptance, though, isn't it? It's about acceptance and self-awareness. When things aren't going so well, you recognize it, and you can do something about it. And I think the challenge we've got, and I've heard this many times in the conversations, is people just don't recognize that they've got challenges or problems,
No.
and
Well,
it's.
they do, but they want to ignore them.
Yeah, and they do something else. They go and help other people, right? And that's all we've got to try and engage with is this. Let's talk about it. Let's learn about it. Let's learn about each other, because I'm a big fan of this thought that says, everybody's got an inspiring story inside them. We just never hear it. We only see what we see in LinkedIn or social media that people share because they feel that that's all I can show. And so, we've got to learn to open it out, haven't we? Chris, we're coming towards the end of this, believe it or not. This is just like time just disappears in this world of talking about these subjects. I just want to give you the floor for a couple of mo's just to say anything else you want to share, anything else you want to say, or anything you want to inspire people to do. It's a big question.
Yeah, right. Okay, put me on the spot, mate.
Right.
Yeah, look, I think mental health is not a taboo subject.
No.
Right. Our society is evolved enough at the moment, and especially in a year where we have been socially removed for our own safety, we've recognized just how critical basic human connection is for us, and it's what we thrive on. So I think as we come out of these various levels of lockdown around the world and move into a COVID normal environment, hopefully within the next sort of 12 months, I think it's important that we reflect on what we have gone through and recognize that the society we had before this is not one we want to continue with. We need to have a greater empathy towards each other.
Yeah.
We need to gain the confidence to be able to talk about what is going on, inside our minds. The more people we can get talking and understanding and build a confidence within them to be able to recognize not only within themselves, but those within their immediate circles, the healthier a society we're going to have as a whole.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah. So, there's a brand sort of called Livin, and their tagline is "It ain't weak to speak." And that there isn't a tagline truer. It ain't weak to speak. Masculinity used to be defined by being that strong, silent type. Masculinity now is defined by someone who is comfortable within their own skin and recognizes that by talking up, it actually takes a lot more strength than staying silent.
Yeah. Brilliant. That's great. Great way to finish. I loved your motto that you shared earlier, to make people comfortable with talking about the uncomfortable. Let's make that happen. Let's continue these conversations of mental health. It's honestly, I found your commentary and your comments and your story inspiring, and I just want to wish you all the very best, Chris, for you and for everybody with Right Mate and everything that you're doing, because you're doing a magical thing. You're helping enable these conversations, and you're bringing together people who are vulnerable potentially and who are at risk. And let's not forget, this is a big community of people that we need to support and we need to encourage in the conversation. So thank you so much for what you do. I'm so pleased to have met you, talked to you, have this opportunity to chat with you as well.
My pleasure, and thank you for doing something like this. It's phenomenal. I hope you have the ability in the coming days and weeks to actually sit back and reflect on just how phenomenal something like this is, and that it's you that's made it happen. So, mate, thank you, and certainly look forward to plenty more chats in the future.
Absolutely, we're going to stay in touch, no doubt about that. And it's really important that we do, because it doesn't matter where we are in the world, there's always something to be done with this subject, of course. Chris, thank you so much. As I always say on this, at the end of all of these sessions, if you are struggling, if you do need extra help, or you do need support, or you're worried about anything, please know there's always someone there to talk to. That's really important to remember. Don't feel that you're on your own. These times are hard. People do feel isolated and lonely in their own thoughts, and let's try and help solve that problem. So my challenge to everybody listening is reach out to somebody today who you might be a little bit worried about, or somebody you haven't spoken to for a little while, because that text, that message, that call can actually make a big impact on somebody. Please do that. Just go and do that, and I'll be doing that. And if you need extra help and support, there's organizations like Samaritans, and there's organizations all across the world that can help you by just listening. Thank you, Chris. We're done now. This is the end of episode 23, and that means there's only one more to go. I will speak to you soon, sir. Take care.
Cheers.